Welcome back. My name is Jason, and I'm going to be talking about the book Hyperion by Dan Simmons. As you can see from the picture here, it is a Hugo Award-winning novel. It's also kind of an interesting, well, it's interesting to me how I got interested in reading this book. I remember seeing it in the library when I was a teenager, and I saw it there and I picked it up because the cover looks very interesting. You've got this spiky thing on the cover. You've got what looks like a boat there sailing over plants, like a field there. And so it struck me as interesting. I picked it up and read the description inside the cover, and not that it didn't pique my interest, but it just didn't pique it enough at the time. If you haven't noticed from the books that I have reviewed so far, I like fantasy books more than I like science fiction books. Not to say that there aren't good science fiction books out there. This book is a very good book. I very much enjoyed reading it. But I prefer my movies to be sci-fi and my books to be fantasy. One of those weird quirks, I guess. I haven't been very impressed with a lot of fantasy-based movies. I mean, the Dungeons and Dragons movie was horrible, with one of the Wayans brothers in it. Yeah, it was a terrible movie. And by the same token, there are horrible sci-fi movies. I just find that when I sit down to either pick up a book and read or watch a movie, I tend to like fantasy books more than I like sci-fi books, and I tend to like sci-fi movies more than I like fantasy movies. Anyway, I've always remembered this cover from that time when I'd seen it in the library. And every so often I would see this book again in the library, and I would think, maybe I should read that. So it finally got to the point where I decided to sit down and read it. I found a copy for like $1 at a local thrift store, and I decided that I would go ahead and read it. So Hyperion is rather interesting. It is, like I said, it is a sci-fi book. It's set in the 29th century, and there is a planet called Hyperion. Now, Hyperion has several interesting characteristics that make this planet unique in the universe. One is what are called the time tombs. They are structures, pyramid structures if I remember correctly, that appear to be moving backwards through time. And so people often go to Hyperion to study these time tombs to figure out what they're for, and to figure out who made them and why they were made, which admittedly is very difficult, because when you think about archaeology and studying ruins and things, you see evidence of what they were used for, and you can extrapolate backwards. And that's not the case with the time tombs, because they were built in the future and they are moving backwards through time. So they were possibly built by a race or a tribe of beings or whatever that hasn't even existed yet. So there are also some rather interesting properties of plants they have there on Hyperion. One of the things that I remember are the Tesla trees. Now, the Tesla trees are trees that generate giant sparks of electricity, and they have their dormant time like we would consider winter the leaves fall off the plants. The plants are dormant during that time period. There are times when the Tesla trees are dormant, and you are able to travel about much more fully on the planet because you're not in danger of being electrified if you walk past a tree. It's probably not the way I picture it, but I picture the stinging cacti from Borderlands 2. If you've never played that game, there are these, they're called stinging cacti, and they're cactusy looking plants that discharge electricity when you get too close or when you shoot them. So I kind of have that vision in my head, but that's probably not very accurate as far as Hyperion goes. So mankind at this point has spread to the stars. Earth has been destroyed. A artificial black hole was created which destroyed the Earth, and mankind went into the stars. The government of the planets is the hegemony of man, and it is kind of run by a mixture of human and AI. There's the Techno Core, which is a group of AIs that basically run everything, really. They advise the kind of the president, basically, if you will, of the hegemony of man, who is also advised by the Senate, the hegemony Senate. Anyway, they're all in it together, and the Techno Core, as I said, AIs, they're linked across planets. Anyway, humanity developed faster than light travel. They call it the Hawking Drive, for obvious reasons. And the Hawking Drive, being that it's faster than light travel, there's time debt that you accrue because you're jumping between worlds. But at the same time, once they had created this and they were able to go out to other planets, they developed the Farcaster network. The Farcaster network are a network of portals that link the worlds. Some worlds have Farcaster portals, some aren't important enough to have them. But the Farcaster portal allows you to basically instantaneously transport yourself from one place in the hegemony to anywhere else that has a Farcaster portal. And it's instantaneous, more or less. So if you take the Farcaster, you can get to where you want to be without running into the fact that you're having this time debt, that you're not aging as everything else around you is. So this is kind of the situation of Hyperion. There's actually also what they call the Ousters. The Ousters are humans who have evolved in space, and they live outside the bounds of the hegemony of man and don't obey its laws, and so there's kind of friction between the two groups. And so at this point in time, there's too much friction going on between the two groups, and it's about to come to blows. At this point in time, and I keep saying that, what happens is 7 pilgrims are chosen to go to Hyperion and to visit the time tombs. The legend is that these 7 pilgrims go, they go to the guardian of the tombs, a being that's called the Shrike. Now the Shrike is what you see on the cover there. This tall, spiky, powerful. They're not really sure what it is or how to stop it or anything. They just know that it's incredibly powerful. And they are to go to present themselves to the Shrike. The legend is that 6 of them will be killed and 1 of them will have their wish granted. So these 7 have various reasons for wanting to journey to Hyperion to meet with the Shrike. So as I said, there are 7 pilgrims. And there are a couple things that are rather interesting. So they need to get to Hyperion, and there's no Farcaster portal to get them directly there. So they have to take a spaceship that's basically a tree flying through space. Yeah, it's a tree that flies through space. It's interesting. Basically, the tree is inhabited by a alien creature that can maintain an environment around the tree in space and also propel the tree through space. So they get to Hyperion, they disembark, and each of them, as I said, has their own story, own reason for being there on Hyperion. For instance, there's a priest, and the priest is there because he originally dropped off on Hyperion another priest who was kind of retiring and wanted to kind of convert the natives. And it turns out that these natives were infected with a kind of a symbiotic parasite that kept them alive. If they died, they came back to life basically the next day because of this symbiotic parasite. But there were detriments. Every time they were brought back to life, they were modified and kind of dumbed down. And this priest dropped off this other priest there so that he could convert the natives. He ended up going back later to try to find out what happened to this priest that he'd dropped off, and ended up encountering the Shrike. And the thing is that basically all of the characters, as they explain their story, they all had a run-in with the Shrike in some shape or form. For instance, there was a poet, and Dan Simmons brings a lot of imagery and references to the old masters and things. For instance, John Keats figures quite prominently, and this poet, like Keats, has an epic poem that he's trying to complete, and he ends up on Hyperion in kind of an artist commune, and he can only write his cantos when the Shrike is running through town killing people, and he ends up encountering the Shrike in this manner. There's Saul Weintraub. He is a Jewish professor, and he goes to Hyperion because his daughter became an archaeologist and started studying the time tombs and ended up catching what was called Merlin's disease, or at least they dubbed it Merlin's disease. For every day she lives, she regresses through time 2. So she is, at this point in time, a mere babe in arms, and has been aging backwards ever since she ran into the Shrike while she was studying the time tombs. So all of these characters, they tell their stories as they're making the pilgrimage from their landing zone to the time tombs, and they share these stories. And this is how you come to find out about the political situation, about the technocore and the AIs, and how how man spread to the stars, and the technology that drives the hegemony of man, and the conflicts that they have with the ousters, and the various factions that have place here in Dan Simmons' world. Very well put together, very well thought out. It was interesting how he told the story and then wove all the pieces back together, always coming back to why these 7 people were making this pilgrimage, and showing why they had been chosen to make the pilgrimage from all of the billions and billions of people who could possibly have been chosen. So, good read, very highly detailed, highly interesting, very well thought out, and definitely should spend your time. If you're interested in sci-fi, you're interested in kind of the time travel and any of that kind of stuff. It's very, very good book. And so right now, signing off.